Hi, everyone. Welcome to our monthly exclusive podcast for our Subscribe Star subscribers and our patrons. Welcome back. You guys asked some great questions for this month, so we're gonna go into these. We had like 35 total, and unfortunately, we can't answer them all. We apologize if we don't get to yours. We just have to pick the ones that we feel like we have the best answers to and go from there. So this first one comes from Jason from Subscribe Star. He asks, did the name change from Dark Pixel to Resonant Arc hurt your channel at all? Some YouTubers never recover after a rebrand or name change. You probably talked about it, but what was the reason behind the name change? So there is a whole video that explains it on the channel. It's called Dark Pixel is Evolving, I think.
Yes.
And I think I used an image from Pokemon. Where the Pokemon evolve.
The third stage, final stage, most powerful stage.
It plays that dun 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 when the dun 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 and the Pokemon evolves. So if you want like the full explanation, I'd go watch that video. It's still listed on the channel. But the long and short of it was that Dark Pixel was the name of our original filmmaking visual effects channel.
Yeah.
And Dark Pixel Gaming was an affiliate to that.
Yeah.
But Dark Pixel did not really have anything to do with the content we were making on the gaming channel.
Yeah, they weren't dark, but they were pixels.
They were pixels.
So it was only like 50%.
Nothing dark about it. But the type of content we were doing was so different from Dark Pixel.
Yeah.
The only reason, like when we first started Dark Pixel Gaming, it was literally just me and Landon doing weird challenges and just like funky like little videos where we're just playing games. Yeah. It was just the Dark Pixel guys playing video games and messing around and having fun.
Yes.
And so we would play Donkey Kong at 300% speed and see if you can beat a level, or we'll do like a Mario level where I have the D-pad and you have the A and B button.
Yeah.
That kind of thing was what Dark Pixel Gaming started out as. And it was just us, the Dark Pixel guys, playing games.
Yeah.
But after a while, I sort of migrated the stuff that I was doing on my old channel, which was Final Fantasy retrospectives and gaming content, video essays, and I started putting it onto that channel. And it kind of became more of what it is now, like what you know of it today, right? And at a certain point, we stopped working on the Dark Pixel channel, and we were doing Dark Pixel Gaming, but it just struck me that like, if someone searched Dark Pixel, they're gonna find this other thing that isn't this. And it would just be kind of confusing, and I didn't feel like it like really accurately represented like what we were trying to do. And so I was like, we should separate the two things and leave Dark Pixel as what that was. And now that we're no longer doing that anymore, this should be called something else. Whether I was right about that remains to be seen.
It's been a couple years now, and I would say that Dark Pixel is a sweet name. If there was a way we could have just changed it to be like Dark Pixel Action and then call this channel the Dark Pixel. This is just Dark Pixel, but with no suffix.
The huge benefit of the name Dark Pixel is that it's very succinct and easy to remember and punchy. It's like Dark Pixel. You don't forget that. You know how to spell that. That's like really easy to remember. And I think there's probably some people who think, oh, that's a way better name still, right? In some ways it is. That's what I'm trying to do.
Right, yeah.
In other ways, I feel like Resonant Arc represents what we do a lot better. But the reason why the channel today doesn't garner the number of views that it used to, I don't think is because of the name change. It's because we're not making those videos at the frequency we used to make them.
Not like that anymore,
We were doing a lot of like really well scripted video essays, very heavily edited, like very high level of presentation. We were doing those on like a weekly basis for a while. And that's because you and I and Landon were all working on the channel as like a full-time job for a while. Or we're trying to make it work as a full-time job.
Yeah.
And that didn't last forever.
No.
It got to a point where we had to go get jobs.
Yes.
And when that happened, I continued to try to work an additional full-time hours to keep it weekly. And that didn't work long because I had a freaking mental breakdown and almost lost my mind.
Yeah.
So I had to step back and be like, I just got to make this a part-time thing. But that meant that the frequency of the uploads went way down.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to make even more complex versions of those types of videos that are even more heavily edited and even more thoroughly researched.
Time, yeah.
Way more time intensive with way less time per week dedicated to it.
Yes, exactly. That's the hard part.
So in the meantime, it was like, okay, what do we release in the meantime? And this podcast kind of started to pick up. But the problem is that we picked a game in Xenogears that took 20 episodes.
Freaking episodes.
And there's some fatigue by the end of that, right?
I would think that we will not be doing that many episodes again.
Ever on anything.
Yeah, or even close. I'd say we shouldn't even go over half that.
Yeah, we should try to wrap stuff up probably in around 10 at the most,
think around
or 12.
10-ish, yeah.
Not make something take
That's
5
2.5 months.
Yeah.
10, yeah.
So, but I mean, that started out being really popular. Like the first episode of Final Fantasy VIII got like 70-something thousand views.
Yeah, which for a 2-hour video, that's pretty good.
It's really good.
Yeah.
And even Nier's first couple episodes were well into the 30,000s.
Yeah, yep.
The first episode of Xenogears was well into 30,000.
And we maintained around 10 up until just the last couple. But
and that's just a fatigue that you expect with a long-running series.
But even still, if you look at our older podcasts that we used to do, it's still a higher view count than those older podcasts, which was just current events and whatever we randomly wanted to talk about.
So the podcast is doing well for what it is.
Yeah.
But I'm not that worried about it because when I release my Final Fantasy retrospectives, they're gonna get those hundreds of thousands of views again.
It's coming back. That's true.
The reason I know that is because I've re-released them like 3 or 4 times, and it happens every time.
Yeah.
So it's gonna happen.
That's true. Yeah.
It's just I gotta finish them, and it's hard to find the time. So I don't think the rebranding has hurt us in that way as much as it has been just the amount of time that we can dedicate to something.
Yeah.
Because of you guys, we're allowed to dedicate the time we do dedicate to it. But with something as intensive as Xenogears, that's pretty much where all my energy was going into.
See, and that's the thing. It wasn't just playing the game. We could get through a game quicker than that if it just wasn't so darn dense and so philosophical and so it's crazy.
But anyways, that's the best answer I can give to it. Eva Pilot Fair wants to know some of our favorite works of nonfiction. I wanted to hand this one to you.
Oh my gosh. Origins and History of Consciousness by Eric Neumann. I gotta say, that's probably the most influential book that I've ever read. I also really like, I've been on a Carl Jung kick, in part because of Xenogears.
Because of Xenogears, right.
So I've just been like reading tons of stuff, Archetypes of the Collective Unconscious, all that kind of stuff. Been really good. I'm reading Symbols of Transformation right now. A lot of his other stuff. Ion, I ended up reading that whole book. Yep. Really dense, really difficult to get through, but very good. And as far as nonfiction stuff goes, I mean, that's mostly what I read. I tend to actually not read fiction books very often. I mostly just read nonfiction. I'm reading some Mircea Eliade books now as well. He wrote one called The Sacred and the Profane, which is like hugely influential. It's comparative religions throughout the world, but very, very good. And gosh, been looking at a lot of books on alchemy and magic lately, and fairy tales, just general fairy tales. So Marie-Louise von Franz and Edward Edinger and Robert A. Johnson, and some really good stuff on some of Jungian type stuff, because he did a lot with alchemy, but like specifically studying alchemy, and there's some fascinating stuff there. It's really fun. So that encapsulates what I've been doing lately. I can't tell you forever. I mean, Dostoevsky's great, and that kind of stuff, but I mostly just read nonfiction.
Yeah. And I'm the opposite. I mostly read fiction.
Exactly.
But the nonfiction I read is mostly tied to storytelling technique and things of that nature.
So it's still kind of relevant.
Still kind of fiction.
Honestly, you should read Marie-Louise von Franz, because she does analyses of fairy tales.
Yeah.
And just so good, just
Yeah.
so good. She's just on point.
Like there are some other nonfiction books that I've read from like what's his name? Harris. Fetch.
Sam Harris.
Sam Harris.
Oh, the meditation. What was that book
I
called?
think so. It was one of his meditation books
with
because
the
he's been on a meditation kick for a while.
And the clouds. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. It's one of the things I like about him actually. Waking Up.
Yeah, Waking Up. Because that's the
Yeah.
name of his podcast, right?
Yes.
Or it was for a while. Now it's Making Sense.
But that's because his new book is going to be called Making Sense. It's all to kind of sell stuff.
Anyways, other stuff that I read, though, is like The Storytelling Animal from Jonathan Gottschall. Really interesting book, kind of about like how evolutionarily, whatever that word would be, or biologically we're driven to tell stories. Like everything we do is around telling stories.
Tell me the name of it again.
Storytelling Animal.
Storytelling Animal.
The Storytelling Animal.
I'd love to read that.
Really good, because you've talked about a lot of similar kinds of things, the archetypes and things that we tell
And the
ourselves
big
over
question,
and over again.
why do we freaking tell stories? It's so weird. It's the weirdest thing.
It is weird.
Especially,
But it's really, really important to who we are.
Oh, yeah.
And then a lot of Robert McKee stuff. He has a book called Dialogue, a book called Story, a book called Characters. You know, a lot of the things that I've picked up in terms of like what I believe are important techniques for good storytelling kind of come from his philosophy. I just like it a lot. I like his thoughts. So that's what I would pick. There's probably more, but...
I know, me too, but I could talk for hours about the nonfiction books that I read.
Zachary Parkinson is asking, do either of you read comic books regularly? I do not.
Nope.
I don't think I've ever... I mean, I remember going to the library as a kid and picking up Spider-Man comics.
I would see them, but I've never read an entire comic
No, me
through.
neither.
I've never read one. I've just read a few issues once or twice.
I do think that it would be interesting to pick up some graphic novels, because there are some really good ones.
Like, yeah.
Watchmen and
Yeah, what was
some
that?
others.
Not Zack Snyder, but the guy, Frank Miller? Is
Frank
that it?
Miller, yeah.
Yeah, he's got a pretty cool style. I'd like to get into some of that, because he's like a film noir kind of guy.
Yeah. So, no, not really.
No.
Which teams do you guys like coming out in the 2021 NBA season?
I didn't pay attention in 2020. I really didn't. I know the
Yeah.
Bucks were great, but I wasn't paying attention hardly at all. So
I don't know who I like
The Suns,
as
though,
much
man.
as I know who I don't like. I don't like the look of the Lakers. I think the Lakers took a step back
Me neither.
by adding Westbrook.
Yeah, Russell
Westbrook.
Yeah.
I think he's a terrible fit for that team. I think LeBron James is the best point guard we've seen in 20
It's
years.
true, but he's 36 and he's kind of looking to not
He's
be.
the best distributor of the basketball, best passer, highest IQ
Yeah.
in the game. They did not need a point guard. They did not need to address that position.
At
And
least not with a $30 million
especially
contract.
didn't need to address it with
Yeah.
a guy who is the opposite of all those qualities.
I know.
Who I respect Russell Westbrook's energy and his effort.
His physique, and the way he can dunk, he's a shorter guy and he can get up there.
He is committed.
Yeah.
He is going to give you every ounce of effort he has. You can ask for no more than that.
Yeah.
But he's a turnover machine. He does not make good decisions, and he cannot shoot the basketball a lick. He's terrible.
Yeah.
He has to get to the basket to score.
Yes, which he can do.
He can do.
But I mean, he's
But
getting older too.
He's going to throw the ball away.
Yes.
9 or 10 times.
Because he
a game.
leaves his feet without knowing what he's
Yes.
going to do, and I think
He's
he
not in
can't.
control.
He can't not do that.
Yeah.
And then he throws it to the perimeter, and
That's
hopes.
his game.
That's what he does.
And
But
that
he is very good though.
What that team needed was shooting and defense.
Yeah.
And he is a terrible shooter. And he's going to turn the ball over a lot, which means that your defensive woes will come to bite you because they're not a strong defensive team. They needed a really great 3-and-D guy.
Yeah.
They got Russell Westbrook, and that's going to, I don't think it's a recipe for success. But in the Western Conference, the Jazz look really good.
The Jazz
Suns
actually
are going to
do,
be good.
and the Suns are great. And that's where we're from, so that's cool.
I think the Clippers are going to struggle because they don't have Kawhi. He's going to be injured probably into the second half of the season.
Yeah, he gets injured a lot.
So it looks like out of the Western Conference, I do like with the Grizzlies, they're kind of emerging. And John Morant is really fun to watch. He's
missed
a
him last year.
second year point guard,
Yeah,
so he was a
I
rookie
haven't
last
been paying
year.
attention.
But he took them to the playoffs.
Nice.
And maybe he was a sophomore year last year. I think last year was their rookie season because he came out with I'm so horrible with names. Zion Williamson.
Oh, him and Zion.
They
Okay,
came in
then
the
it
same
was before.
draft.
Yeah, wasn't Zion from Ohio State?
No, he's from Duke.
Oh, he was at Duke. That's right.
The Grizzlies are probably going to be pretty good. I think that they might emerge more into that mid-tier in the Western Conference, that 4 or 5 seed.
Nice.
I think you're going to see the Trailblazers fall a little bit. I don't even know if the Lakers make the playoffs. They'll make a run at the end of the season and maybe get into that 7th or 8th seed. But I think this is the year in the Western Conference if you want to get out of it. For the Jazz or the Suns again, if they want to make it back to the NBA championship, this is their season. They got to do it now. They got to win now, basically. But in the East, obviously, the Nets, the Brooklyn Nets, are going to be favored.
They will, except
Kyrie Irving.
I don't know if Kyrie is going to be able to play the whole year.
Yeah.
He's going to stick.
I don't know if they need him, though.
I don't know. He's so good, though, man. He's so good.
He's great.
But
I have similar problems with him as I do with, well, actually, it's totally opposite.
But he can shoot.
Kyrie Irving
Kyrie's a pretty good shooter.
has all of the skills that Russell Westbrook needs, but he lacks the commitment.
He doesn't have the drive.
That Russell Westbrook has.
That's true.
And that I feel is even worse. I would rather have Russell Westbrook, who I can depend on every game, even though he has many flaws in his game, than Kyrie Irving, who has the whole package, but I just don't know if the dude's going to be there or not. Hey, I never know. He's just like, I'm not showing up today, or whatever.
Kevin Durant's there still, right? No, so
you have Kevin Durant, you're probably going to.
You're going to make it. You're going to make it pretty far.
So I think they'll be fine. But I mean, they got shellacked by the Bucks in the first game of the season.
Oh, the Bucks are so good, though.
The thing about the Bucks is that they have the ability to repeat, but it all kind of, for me, depends on Chris Middleton. If Chris Middleton plays at the level he's capable of, which he's not consistent at, they'll probably win again. But if he doesn't, because sometimes he's just not like very aggressive, and he's just not. He'll just have these bad nights. Like they can be beat. So it's hard to say. If I'm going to have to pick, I'm going to say the Jazz are coming out of the West this year. I think that this is, what is his fetching name?
Donovan Mitchell?
Donovan Mitchell is he's had enough heartbreaking
enough of
playoff
this nonsense.
losses.
Yeah, he's ready to
ascend.
And honestly, his game has grown a lot since his rookie year, so he's ready.
I feel like the Denver Nuggets might challenge them the most.
Yeah.
But it'll depend on if Jokic can stay healthy, and if Murray can stay healthy, which they've had problems with.
Yeah.
But I think the Jazz will come out of the West, and I think the Nets will come out of the East, and I think the Nets will win the NBA Finals.
All right.
Thank you for letting us talk about something that's not JRPG related. That was great. Okay, this is Jackie Thao, or Tao maybe. This question could be answered on here by you guys or whoever else as well. I just started to pick up reading. I was just wondering if you guys had any recommendations of great fantasy books.
Lord of the Rings. The Witcher, I've read the first book of that series, and the writing is very good.
Read these books. I love them.
Read this book.
Read that book, that Silmarillion. It's a pretty decent book. I mean, those are the easy answers.
I know.
I mean, if you've read those,
I don't read enough.
I like Mistborn. Mistborn was a really good little trilogy from Brandon Sanderson. I really enjoyed that. I think that's worth reading. Let's see.
Harry Potter.
Dune just came out.
That's you should probably check out the books. If you're watching the movie, you should read the book.
I really liked that movie, and it's science. It's technically science fiction, but it's very fantasy-like. It's a feudal galactic system. There's dukes and emperors and political intrigue, kind of
and tribes,
Game of Thrones-esque, with all these ruling families and stuff. And it's a hero's journey story, so it very much feels fantasy, even though it is technically science fiction. These are easy answers, I know, but they're all great.
Yeah.
I think what else? I have a couple of others that I'm planning on reading myself that I've bought, but I haven't really gotten around to yet. Gardens of the Moon by Stephen Erickson. Let's see. I've also, that's historical fiction, Shogun, which I thought was awesome. Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. That's a different series. That's Stormlight Archive, which is different from Mistborn. Don't read Sword of Shannara. I hated that book. What else did I have in here that I was really looking forward to checking out? There was something else.
Got a fish ton of books.
There was something I skipped over. Okay, here we go. Red Rising. Red Rising, I've heard really good things about this from Pierce Brown. That's one I really want to get into. Anyways, one of those hopefully will be something worth reading, right?
Cool.
Carlos answered him and said Mistborn trilogy for sure. There you go.
go.
Edward Pinaula. Sorry if this is too broad a question, but what are your thoughts on the state of the entertainment industry today, gaming included?
It sucks.
You know, I was just talking about this with you a little bit on the way here. I saw Dune, and I was like, I have not felt like that coming out of a movie
In
since
a long
Fellowship
time,
of the
right?
Ring.
Yeah.
Since
I
I
haven't
was in
seen
high
Dune
school.
yet.
There's just something about it. Like, there's other movies I've really liked. Like, we went and saw not Interstellar, Inception in theaters.
Oh yeah, that was a trip. That was
I
fun.
really liked that movie too. But there was some kind of special quality, and this might just be nostalgia talking, I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a special quality about the movies that came out. I'm not saying that it made them better. There was just something about how they were. There was just like a quality about movies, what they were like and what they kind of felt like and how they were structured, and the types of movies you would see. When I was junior high and high school,
90s and early 2000s.
so like a movie like The Last Samurai, I feel like it just isn't made anymore.
Yeah,
They don't make movies like that anymore.
Right.
They don't make movies. There's just they've kind of changed what the blockbuster feels like to go see. And there's kind of a formula to it, and all the Star Wars movies and all the Marvel movies feel the same.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they
Hobbit
are the
kind
same.
of went
They
that direction.
feel the same. There's like
Yeah.
this certain. It has to be a certain level of fun.
Yes.
And so there's got to be
And
all these comedy
there
elements.
has to be a
in it,
joke every so often,
and it's
even
all
if it doesn't
paced
fit.
in a certain way to where there's like, instead of having your 3 action set piece structure with a lot of character in between it, it's like 5 or 6. And so there's not enough time to develop characters like they used to be able
That's
to do.
what I miss. I don't feel as attached to a lot of the characters anymore.
Yes, and then that kind of moved towards television and streaming service.
Netflix and stuff.
Like that's where you get, then that's where I spend most of my time watching stuff now.
Well, I watched Squid Game. Did you see that yet?
I haven't seen it yet.
I mean, I watch everything Korean, right?
Yeah.
So I watch all that stuff. That talk about, a new take on something that people thought couldn't be done again, or as well as Battle Royale or Hunger Games. And it's like, no, there's a lot you can do with this type of genre. And it's crazy and unsettling. But I see when you say the state of entertainment
industry.
we're talking about America mostly, but if we look outside of America, there's some pretty good stuff coming out of Korea, like really, really good stuff. And they're innovating on storytelling in a way that Americans are not willing to risk.
Yeah.
And Korea is like, the state of the Korean entertainment industry is killing it.
Yeah.
They what was that? They won Best Picture last year for
for Parasite.
The Parasite, and then a Korean director won Best Director this year, and people are starting to notice, like, holy cow, Korea has like some killer entertainment, and like BTS is freaking everywhere now. This stuff keeps happening, and it's starting to become more and more rapid. Where it's like, hey, Korea's at the forefront of the entertainment industry now. It's approaching it, and rightfully so. Probably for the last 20 years should have been in a certain spotlight that they haven't been in favor, because people are favoring American stuff that Netflix has luckily, and other streaming sites have luckily shown a light on. Like, some foreign stuff's really good, and specifically Korea. Yeah. So, but I don't look too much on American stuff, but I am looking forward to seeing Dune. Yeah. It does look good.
That's how I felt about Dune. Yeah. Dune's a much slower paced film.
Good.
Than your
Build the
Marvel
world.
movies and that sort of thing. And
My favorite
that's why
part of Lord of the Rings is Disc 1 of the Fellowship. Okay, I said Disc 1 because I always watch the extended edition, but Fellowship of the Ring first half. Yeah. Because some people would say, oh, that's the boring part. No,
it isn't.
That's the best
That's the best part of the whole movie.
It's the world. It's the characters.
You
it's so
establish
strong.
what they're trying to fight for and what they're trying to save. You actually feel like it's important because you spent time there loving it yourself.
And it's not just action every 30 minutes. Okay, here's your new action scene. Here's your new action scene. Here's your new action scene.
I really loved Dune. I thought it was great, and it harkened back to me to just kind of like the way movies were paced and structured when I was growing up, and I like it. So, state of the entertainment industry, I actually think if I were to answer that honestly, it's always kind of been the same. There's like a lot of really bad stuff, and there's a few really good
and there's
things.
some gems, yeah.
And we always remember the really good stuff.
It's probably always been that way.
And we forget the bad stuff.
Yes, yeah.
But when you're inundated with the bad in the present day, it's like, oh, everything sucks.
Yes.
But it always kind of did.
That's a very good point.
Seth Spears says, can you guys discuss your opinions on the art style used in newer anime? The art style that is less...
Yeah.
I feel like we've touched on this.
We have. It definitely looked better in the 90s, and yeah.
In our opinion, yeah, it did. And I think we did a whole discussion on this in a video that is our most disliked video on the internet, probably, called A Gen 1er's Thoughts on Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition or something like that.
Oh my gosh.
Which is on the archive channel.
Great.
So there's a two-parter there. So we did that one, and then the video that directly followed that was me responding to all the freaking feedback that we got. I'd go watch those because we mostly talk about that there.
Yeah.
But I want to address at least this last part. Seth asks, why does Cowboy Bebop look so much better than Sword Art Online? And why is the newer style becoming so popular? Because it is
more efficient,
cheaper and more efficient
cheaper
to produce. And when I use the word cheap, I just mean inexpensive, right?
Yeah.
It costs less money to produce Sword Art Online quickly than it does Cowboy Bebop. I started watching Cowboy Bebop yesterday again.
Oh, again? I haven't seen it in a few years.
It's been a long time.
Yeah.
I got through the episode where Spike fights against Vicious in the cathedral.
Oh, that's the sweetest scene. That scene is so good.
One of the most memorable, visually memorable sequences in anything I have ever seen.
Dude.
Cowboy Bebop, now to compare...
And it's because the art was so vivid and detailed. And
to compare Sword Art Online with Cowboy Bebop might not be that fair.
It's not fair.
Because I don't think Sword Art Online is the pinnacle of like the greatest visual anime today.
In the current last decade.
As Cowboy Bebop was
in
certainly for its time.
Yeah. So good.
So there's probably an anime out there that is recent that you could compare to Cowboy Bebop and say these are on a similar level of their visual ambition or something like that. That might be a better comparison.
Yeah.
But I do agree with the sentiment in general that there is more of the Sword Art Online style than there used to be. And I don't like the direction it's gone.
Attack on Titan would probably be a better comparison. Attack on Titan.
Yeah, it's animated pretty well.
Yeah, it's well animated and it looks good, but it doesn't quite look as good as the 90s. That's true. But it looks better than Sword Art Online.
But Cowboy Bebop, some of the animation in that just blows my mind. There's a scene from the first episode where Spike's kind of sparring, or not sparring.
Yeah, where he talks about being fluid like water.
He's like doing fighting, and they do a slow turn into his kick that looked so close to a real human motion.
Yeah.
I don't know if they just like drew a billion frames or something, but it was just so smooth the way his leg came into position. And I was just like, wow, I look like I watched a real human being do that. The animation was so fluid. It was just unbelievable. But to do that, you have to draw 5,000 frames.
I know, because it goes to slow motion.
A long time.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily cost effective in an industry that's very competitive. I mean,
yes. Oh, there's something like 300 or 400 anime released every year.
Yeah.
Maybe it's even more than that, but there's a high number released every freaking year now. It's so much.
Yeah.
And we still can't get Made in Abyss 2. Like, what the heck? Now, that's one where it benefited from having a softer art style because that gave it a feeling, that didn't need to be so detailed.
Yeah. But
here's a good one. Magus Bride.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Okay, that one is it's still not on Cowboy Bebop, but better than Sword Art Online. More representative of, and it's got some pretty good art, especially for the backgrounds. It's got some pretty good art and some pretty realistic movements.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, animation's tough, man.
But still, you can't do the Cowboy Bebop now unless you spend a ton of money.
Yep.
And people are just going to pirate the anime anyways, and so they don't make much money on it.
Or it's a passion project of a small team that break through.
Sure. That's typically like the movies, like Your Name.
Yeah.
Like, holy crap. That was
Yeah.
that's pinnacle. That even beats some of Ghibli's stuff. Your
Yeah.
Name looked so good, but that's movie and that's a little bit different, but still.
This is a pretty interesting question from bpace777. As you guys have learned more about how a proper story is supposed to be told, do you find that you enjoy improperly told stories less, or are you more forgiving because now you know how hard it is to do them correctly?
That's an interesting question.
It's
My
kind
gosh.
of both.
It's kind of both. I see that exact thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are times when I look at something, especially if I've done any research in behind the scenes, and I know what the specific
What they were
problems
going for, or what the problems were.
Yeah, that
Sure.
I can go, okay, I can see why they couldn't
Yeah.
quite get this right. But yeah, you do develop a very analytical like approach to everything, and it can make it hard to just
Yeah.
turn that off and
Yes.
just enjoy something.
And-
I have an easier time with comedies.
Oh, me too.
Than I do with
I'm
dramas.
hardly at all critical. The only
Almost
critique
never.
of comedies is, was it funny or not?
Yeah.
That's the only critique. I don't care much. That's why South Park could succeed.
Yeah.
Just little cutout paper things, the crappiest animation you can possibly do.
Yeah.
And it's like, but it's funny. So everyone watched it. It didn't matter that it was
Now,
looked so bad.
if I was George Carlin, I might not be as forgiving of comedies. I might be
Okay, yeah.
more analytical about that.
Yeah.
Because it's like when you know the craft as well as you do, we have a whole podcast on that
We do actually. We do.
about
the setup, payoff, and
well, it was like,
I can't remember.
is it better to be like a well-informed expert or a layman or something like that, because you stop enjoying things like the more that you understand about it or the better you are at something,
Yes.
because you see the flaws and you see
Yeah.
the problems with things.
I can't remember the summary of that.
Anyways, we had a whole episode on that too, so maybe go watch that podcast. That's on the
I will say that
archive channel.
I get a huge kick out of watching my daughter tell a story. And the details she thinks are important to the story and how it makes zero sense and does not come together in the end. It is so, I love it because you can see it, she's trying to make it work, and that's fascinating.
Yeah. Are there certain things that immediately turn you off in a story? For me, it's sudden, gratuitous violence with no build-up. It's what stopped me from continuing with the show Invincible after one episode.
Oh.
I don't know.
Gratuitous in general, but it's in the descriptor. The word gratuitous does imply that it's
Without
unnecessary.
earning it. Without earning it.
Yeah.
The reason it feels gratuitous is because you didn't build up to it, as he says. You didn't earn that
Sure.
moment.
Like a gratuity.
Yeah.
A free pass.
Right.
It's like, well, no, you don't deserve
think-
that free pass.
I think the
so I'm not going to give it to you.
The principle at the core of that is something I really agree with.
Sure, me too, actually. Me too.
Don't try, and this is maybe what we talked about a little bit with Nier, some of what we called the melodrama in it.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to pay off something that you didn't earn first by
Right.
building that character into a real character
Yeah.
and trying to make me feel immensely sad that
Right.
that character died. When I don't, it's not even really a character. It's just a caricature.
It's a caricature. And you don't care when caricatures die.
Yeah.
Because they're stereotypes.
Yeah.
They're not real. Yeah.
Same principle, just
Yes.
maybe a little different.
Now, I gotta say though, gratuitous violence, I would agree, generally speaking, when something like that happens, it's like, oh, what are they doing? But sometimes I get a kick out of it, because we did VFX, and
Yes.
it's fun to add blood to things.
It's really
And
fun.
Sometimes I can watch it and be like, oh, they had so much fun making that kit the camera and look all
Sometimes
crazy.
we would tune it down.
Yes.
But it was fun to see it gone fully committed to
Yes.
first.
Yes,
So we would make the
exactly.
most violent version
then you
possible
dial it
first,
back.
and then like, okay, let's probably dial it
Yeah,
down.
literally have the people explode and yeah. But Squid Game does this to great effect though, because you've got to understand what they're going for, because you
Yeah.
don't know where it's going at first, and when it happens, it is sudden, gratuitous, violent. Well, it seems that way, but they earn it throughout the show later on. It's not earned necessarily at the beginning. It's supposed to be sudden and seemingly gratuitous and unnecessary, but they earn it ex post facto.
Yeah.
In that sense.
Yeah. Let's see. We got one. We got a couple from Chris Kraus. I'm trying to remember which one I wanted to answer of all these. Oh, I want to pick this one. This is the shorter one. I feel bad because Chris is, he was actually on the podcast once. He does like a lot of stage, what do you call it?
Stage combat or?
Yeah, he did stage combat. That's what he talked to us about. But he does a lot of work on the stage, right?
Cool. Just theater.
Theater, yeah. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. But this short one, I just really like because I have a good answer to this. He says, one change. Pick a bad film, story, game that you get one change to make it better. And I'm not going to pick a bad film because I like the film, but this one thing would have made it great.
Even better.
It came out mediocre. It could have been great. And that is the film, it's Sunshine, right?
Oh, yes.
Where they're trying to ignite the sun.
Cillian Murphy, Darren Aronofsky.
They're taking, I think it might have been Aronofsky. They're taking a ship into the sun because the sun's dying out, and they're going to ignite it and like keep it going.
Nuke it.
Nuke the sun.
Yep.
Brilliant film from a cinematic standpoint.
Yeah, very artistic.
It's beautiful to look at, and the first half of the movie is really great. There is a huge conflict in the film, and they tried for some reason. It's as if they didn't think their conflict was big enough, and I don't know how it could have been bigger. I really don't. The sun's going to explode and kill everybody. How do you get a bigger conflict than that?
Yeah.
For some reason, they thought that's too boring, and they try to inject this second ship that had failed
with
before
the bad guy.
Yeah, so they had like the first mission that failed. Now this is the second mission.
That way, it personifies the enemy, where it's man versus nature.
Yes.
But it becomes
man versus man.
It becomes man versus man. And this was one of the problems that Peter Jackson had, which is Sauron's just this floating abstract eye in the middle of nowhere. We need to bring a thing that people can relate to that's an actual enemy that Aragorn fights, you know? And anyways,
they tried to do that.
They did.
And the second half of the movie sucks. And it's really too bad because it could have been a really great movie if they just cut that whole freaking second half and just made it a shorter movie.
Make it shorter. I think that Fellowship of the Ring would have gone from a $1 billion movie to a $1.1 billion movie. It would have made $100 million more if they got rid of the wizard fight between Gandalf and Saruman. It's a low point in the movie.
We were talking about that last week because I was watching it again recently.
Yes.
And I remember liking that scene as a kid.
I actually did too.
I thought it was so dope that the wizards were fighting. It's like one of the few times in the whole
invisible
trilogy where the wizards actually do any like magical fighting really at all.
Yeah.
And so I was just into that because I think wizards are dope.
Well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it would have made the movie less money.
No, because upon watching it this time, it is the silliest.
It doesn't look good.
Dumbest fight. It is so lame and so like derpy looking. Yeah. And you can like see the strings. You can't see them, but you can see that they use strings to like flip or to spin Gandalf in a circle.
The Homer Simpson walk.
It looks so dumb. It looks so dumb.
Great movie, but that would have made it a lot better. I would have to think about that a little too much.
Yeah. Jonah the Man asks a question that I'm going to respond to you directly on here because it's one I have to think about. It's a good question. It's a thought-provoking question, but I don't have a good answer for it right now. The Malgador asks, what do you think makes a great villain? We had a whole podcast on what makes a great villain.
We did.
If you haven't seen it, go check out our archive channel. But I think...
Dynamic character and the shadow of your main hero. I feel like that would
the summary of that was that you can go two directions with a villain. You can either make them the embodiment of power and intimidation and evil and just make them scary, but you can't get the audience to relate to them or else it'll destroy that that vision of power. Like the intimidation factor goes down if you understand the character better.
Yes, once the character shows up on screen.
Yeah.
Then it's like, oh, that's not as scary as I thought.
Well, there's that too, but it's like, if I actually understand the villain's history or like the root of their motivation, it's like you start to see their point of view.
They become human.
And it's no longer
like
Michael Myers who's just, the guy shows up on screen, I'm terrified every single time he comes around because he's just going to kill me, he's just evil, right? There's something terrifying about not knowing the guy behind the mask.
Yeah.
Darth Vader might be similar in the original Star Wars, and then as you got to know Darth Vader, he wasn't scary anymore by the end, right?
And then he could be redeemed, but he still had to die.
Yep, exactly. We talked about that on the other podcast.
We did.
But anyways, there's that direction, which is a lot of horror villains, where they're just scary, and they're just powerful.
They're just dragons.
And I don't know where they're coming from.
Yeah.
And I don't know what their plan is, and I can't understand them. There's that type of villain, and then there's the other type, which is the sympathetic villain, which is you help us understand why they are the way they are, and it makes you think, it makes you reflect on your own values.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, he has a point. That's the other type.
So both can be very effective.
Yes.
But the more mentally engaging one would be this one.
The more intellectually stimulating is
that
this.
you can actually understand.
The scarier one is this.
Well, the reason this would resemble the shadow then, right?
Yeah.
Because when you understand this, you understand yourself.
Yes.
You say, that made sense to me. That's kind of scary that the villain made sense to me because that means that there's a part of my subconscious that understands that and that maybe would even do that. Given the opportunity, and that's even scarier than just a dragon. You got to go stab it in the heart, you know.
Yeah, and I think good villains commit to one or the other. If you try to go somewhere in between, I think you'll kind of have a mediocre or bad villain.
Yeah,
because it's like they're not going to be as scary or as powerful as you want them to be, or you won't understand them enough to give them a true character, and it falls flat.
Yeah.
So I feel like you got to commit hard one way or the other to make a great villain. But either way can work, right?
Sure.
Let's see here. This is a good one. You've won some kind of lottery, and the prize is a whole day spent with a video game celebrity creator. You get to go to work with that person and can talk and ask them whatever you want about his or her creations, how he or she came up with the ideas, and so on. A whole day to understand how the person thinks, creates, and puts concepts into life. Who is your pick? And he says, I bet Mike picks Yasunori Mitsuda. Curious about Kason. He says that he picks Miyamoto. There's two parts to this for me. If it's just me, just for the sake of just for me, I'm just going to go enjoy the day, it's going to be Yasunori Mitsuda. But if it's going to be for the purpose of me gleaning information that's necessary for my Final Fantasy videos, 100% Hironobu Sakaguchi.
Okay.
I've got so many questions for that man that I need answered in order to make great videos.
Yes.
So I would pick him for the sake of the community and for the sake of
to then share the knowledge.
Yeah. If I don't give a fetch about that, then Yasunori Mitsuda.
I would pick Shigeru Miyamoto, and I don't think it's a question. Like really, it would have to, like, video games are Shigeru Miyamoto. Like he is it. He is the one. But I would like to shadow him 20 years ago. I don't want to shadow him today. He's just a producer who just paperwork and green lighting and budgeting money. I want to shadow him when he was making Mario Brothers 3 or something like that, or
Mario
one
World.
of those games, or Mario World, and glean info from that.
David Wallet's asking about Dungeon Encounters, which is from Hiroyuki Ito. I've not seen anything on that, so I don't think I can give a good answer to that question. But thank you for making aware that it exists, because I had no idea what that guy was doing. Hiroyuki Ito for me has been like, I have no idea what he does now. Oh crap, Dude McGuy, I'm sorry. I told you I would do it this month, didn't I? He's reposting from last month.
We have to.
Okay, we got to do this one. You've mentioned in the past that subtext is an important element of good dialogue and that many RPG stories lack subtext, which can make character conversations feel basic or uninteresting. But at the same time, if subtext is too vague, like in certain parts of Xenogears dialogue, then some portion of the player base will inevitably miss certain setups and cues, and therefore the payoffs and reveals might be unsatisfying for them later in the story. 100% with you on this one so far.
Yes, I think I have a good answer for this.
Meaning that including too much or too little subtext is a problem, and you have to find a good balance. So with that in mind, given that most classic and modern RPGs are targeted at the teens to early 20s demographic, do you think that perhaps a general lack of subtext in the dialogue could be a feature and not a bug? That the writing style is primarily a business decision rather than the writers not being talented enough to include dialogue with subtext. That the primary goal is to make sure that 99% of players get it in regards to the setups and payoffs, so they will feel satisfied by the story and buy more games in that series. If the story is well received by the primary demographic, then the writer would get more opportunities from that company, so they could be financially incentivized to write that way in light on subtext.
I mean, that's right.
Or write in a way that is light.
That it's intentional.
Or do you think it's a case that writers not knowing or respecting the audience? That the writers themselves are underestimating the audience's ability to identify and examine good subtext and dialogue, and the business is simply unaware or doesn't care because the general gaming audience at large isn't really demanding better writing for those games in most cases.
I think it's the first case for the writers and the second case for the business people. The business people think that they don't respect the audience. The producers, the business people, the higher-ups. They don't respect the audience. They think, but the writers, I think, do. And I think the subtext that does appear in games is not because of the business people.
Yeah.
It's because of the artists and the writers who put it there. And there would be less of it now. I would say that's probably true. One argument would be the Final Fantasy VII Remake and the way that they make the terrorists a lot less terroristy, so as to not give the player a difficult situation to deal with in their mind of cognitive dissonance.
That definitely feels like a business move,
yes,
less than an artistic
Less than an artistic move, because that was challenging. That was a challenge. Like, video games used to challenge the player, not just in, can you beat this level, but story-wise, especially with Final Fantasy and other games, and Xenogears, is like, we're challenging you artistically and mentally, this, like, think this through. This is... And that's when video games are taken more seriously. And writers and artists want games to be taken more seriously. But business people don't. Business people want to maintain that separation so that they can, group people together as much as possible.
Yeah.
I think the key to writing good subtext, though, is to include patterns and symbolism within the subtext, right? Because you can, your subtext, I don't think you can have too much subtext in a game.
Yeah.
I think that subtext, because there's only so many NPCs, but it's like when you go out in the real world, or what I would want to do in one of these worlds is talk to everybody. And most of what they tell me is not going to be relevant. And that's cool. Now, at the same time, I want my games to be 30 hours long and not freaking crazy. Mm-hmm. But I don't think games can have too much subtext, because the subtext builds a picture. I'm not saying it's always done correctly, but as long as there's a reason for it, the implication is that the subtext is pointing towards something else. It's foreshadowing, it's giving detail, it's summarizing something in a different way. It's encapsulating things in a different way that some people will pick on it and some people won't. But that's fine, because it's subtext, it's not the text. If your subtext is the text, that's a problem. Yeah. But subtext, you can never have too many lower level kind of hints at what's going on to help people build a complete picture. And a lot of that comes through things like symbolism and patterns, because your subtext is basically leading people to making your brain think in a certain way. And if it's done properly, and if it's leading people towards, the proper way, then your the subconscious mind will recognize the symbol before the low resolution image that you've conjured up, will recognize it before your actual conscious mind does. And that way, when you encounter things later on, you think that, oh my gosh, that's what I was coming to, because the things line up within your subconscious, right? That's like, oh, it's perfect, it makes sense now. And you can't have too much of that, because even if some of it misses, that's fine. Most of it won't miss, or a lot of it won't miss. It all won't miss. And so, anyways, you can never have too much subtext. You can never have too much hidden things and symbolism and patterns. Yeah. Just fit as much of it as you can into your story. And it all can be thematically important, or narratively important, or character-wise important. Yeah. But yeah, it's important. I
think there's another element to this, another level of competency as a storyteller. That, well, outside of, say, only written mediums. So subtext in, like, writing a novel is hard, because you have to describe
that's a good point.
How a character says something in order to get across the nonverbal communication
Yes.
that helps the person understand the subtext.
Because the subtext is written in the text.
Because the text doesn't contain the message that
Yeah.
you're trying to deliver. It's delivered in the tone of voice the character uses, or in the fact that they roll their eyes when they say it,
Sure.
or that they mutter under their breath, or that they exhibit a nervous mannerism or something
Yeah.
like that. There's so many ways we communicate outside of just the words we use that we can pick up on, and we know that person's not telling the truth, or the person's worried about something, or there's something else underneath what they're saying that they're afraid to say, or that they're worried about saying, or something like that. And a competent storyteller is able to give you that message without saying it on the nose all the time. So it's not so much about. I think that subtext doesn't have to be something that's missed by anyone if you're good enough at showing that nonverbal communication. As a director, you've got to show me the guy's eyes as he says it, doing the right thing in order for me to pick up on the context. If he just delivers it in a standard way and doesn't say it, then I'll miss the subtext there, right?
Yes.
And the level at which you want them to understand it or not, maybe on a second run they will see it or not.
So you make it more subtle, you bury it.
Yeah, there's like a scale of subtlety versus explicitness. Because like a lot of times, this is kind of funny, it's happened repeatedly. I'll say something is in the subtext, and people are like, that's not subtext at all, it's right there. But it's not, it's just obvious subtext. Right? They're not saying the words, therefore it's not in the text. It's in the subtext because they're not saying it, but the mannerism, the delivery of it is made obvious through the nonverbal part of it.
Right.
So it's not subtle, but it is subtext.
Sure.
So the level at which it is obvious and people will not miss it depends on your artistic goals. And I guess to really get back to the center of his question, is it bad writing that a lot of these people aren't doing this? If the intention is to make sure 99% of the audience understands it, well, no. I mean, obviously, that if that's the goal, then that's what they wanted to do. I just don't think personally that creates a very interesting conflict, because that's just not the way people are.
Right, right. They're not explicit with everything.
Too often, it's just not reflective of human nature.
The more subtext, the better. I really think that, because that your brain picks up on that in ways that aren't so explicit, but that you still can understand it. And as they say, show, don't tell. In part, what that's saying is subtext, not text.
Yes.
Right? That's another rephrasing of that, right?
Yes, exactly.
And the more you can show or even imply, because subtext can technically be in text sometimes, right? Depending on how things are described.
Ellipses or your ums or uhs
exactly.
or something like that,
or
trailing off.
Or there's maybe there's some words that are told that are, in Harry Potter, when the first time Snape meets him, this post went viral some years back, he's like, Harry, what do you get if you infuse asphodel with wormwood or something like that? And Harry doesn't really, he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. But asphodel is like a lily, and wormwood is whatever Harry Potter's mom's name was, last name.
Lily something.
Well, she had a last name before it was Potter, right?
I forget.
Anyways, the idea being that what Snape was telling Harry was, what do you get when you mix something that's he was basically talking about his parents.
Yeah.
And
But it's in the subtext,
at least specifically his mother, but it's subtext because it wasn't explicitly stated in the text. You have to research it later or know or figure things out on your own or something like that. It's not technically what he said. What he said was, what do you get when you infuse this with that? But what he meant was, like, your mom was important to me somehow.
Yeah.
In a very strange way. Maybe asphodel was like a flower for the lily. Anyways, something crazy like that, but you can look that up. That's still technically subtext,
yes.
I think, because you can never have too much of that, because that's just symbolic, and it's just like,
and it's how we are.
It makes things more engaging, especially on a second playthrough. And most of what we glean information-wise is subtext. So That's how our brain's used to processing info. We're not used to being told everything all the time and processing it. We're used to imagining things and seeing things and looking for things and trying to recognize patterns that sometimes aren't there.
Yeah.
But still,
Yeah.
that's how our brains work.
I think in order to write interesting characters, you have to be observant of how people are. You have to see that people are not always telling the truth.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're afraid to tell the truth, or
Yes.
there's all kinds of reasons, and that exhibits itself through subtext in everyday life. And so if you're writing something that has like no subtext in it ever, it's not that there's something necessarily inherently wrong about that. Like, I think a lot of children's cartoons and things like that have very little subtext in it because kids aren't good yet at recognizing subtext.
Yeah.
That's a skill you have to learn by observing the way people use tone of voice and the way people use their hands when they talk and the way that people exhibit nervous behaviors. And you have to learn how to see that and, oh, I recognize that. That's communicating something to me. And a 5-year-old is terrible at that. A 40-year-old hopefully should be pretty good at it
If
at some
they've been
point.
around in the world, yeah.
Right? If they've actually had social interaction like a healthy person does. So there's different levels to it. There's an audience demographic you have to consider with this. But I think if you're writing something for a general audience, I mean, even Pixar movies, which are made for kids, are also made for adults, and there's tons of subtext
and the
in it.
subtext is what makes it fun for the adults.
That's what makes it interesting for an adult to watch. That's literally what separates the two levels of the film, is this part of it, the text, the kids can understand all of it.
Yeah.
The subtext the kids can't understand that the parents pick up is what makes it interesting to watch.
Watching Toy Story with my daughter, I have the first thought that I've had ever, as far as I can remember, Andy doesn't have a dad.
Yeah.
Where's Andy's dad?
Yep.
What's going on? How is this? Maybe that's why he's so attached to his toys all the time, because his dad and his mom probably works if his dad's not there.
Yep.
And anyways, it's like, kids don't think of that.
Never
Kids don't
thought of
care.
that.
Kids are
Never
just like,
thought of
whatever.
that.
This is about toys doing whatever. But it's like when adults watch it, it's like, whoa. There's something deeper going on here that isn't explicitly pointed at, but that's like totally, it underlines like the whole film.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So I think, it's not necessarily that something with less subtext and that's meant for like a teenage audience is a bad thing, as much as it is just like at this stage of my life, it's not as interesting as maybe it used to be.
Yeah.
I'm looking for something that's a little more reflective of the way people really are, and I'm trying to understand that more as an adult now, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, I hope that's an okay answer.
I think so.
I think I'm going to skip this one for now, sorry. Let's do this one. This will be our last one for today. Well, maybe we'll do one more because it's this time, so we got to wait a little while anyways.
Yeah, we can just keep going a little longer.
Let's just go a little longer this time. Raj Mann asks, you once tweeted a while ago about Death Stranding. I was wondering if you could elaborate. I would love to. I find Kojima to be a fantastic conceptualizer, but a really poor writer who over-explains his worlds and substitutes dialogue for exposition dumps. 100% true. You are 100% right about that. But his imagination and broader strokes are still too compelling to turn away. Just wondering your thoughts on him, the game, and how he writes his characters in games. Yes, Death Stranding has all the problems you just mentioned. All of them. All of Kojima's failings as a writer, technical writer, are all over Death Stranding. And anybody who does not like Death Stranding's story, I cannot blame you for that. It is way more convoluted than it need be. It's not explained in ways that I would find technically sound from a writing perspective. There is a pretentiousness to Kojima's artsy style that reeks of style over substance, or at least style with very little substance behind it, in parts. That's not the reason that I loved Death Stranding. The reason that I loved it is because it completely challenged a worldview for me. And one I still struggle with, which is I am a hermit recluse who had, through some relatively traumatic experiences as a kid, found it very hard to socialize in larger groups. I'm very good at one-on-one or with a small group of people. I grew to be terrified of larger groups. But the other thing that's weird about that is I have no problem performing. So I could get on stage in front of an audience, or I can do public speaking and feel completely comfortable. But if I'm in a room with, let's say, 10 people, I
just go
have
sit in the
so
corner
much anxiety.
Yeah.
I want to freaking hang myself. Like, I would rather die than go through that. It's not as bad anymore as it was. It was really bad in my later teenage years, probably through my early 20s, and I started to kind of do some psychoanalysis on myself, right?
Yeah.
I started to actually like reflect a little bit, like what's wrong with me, what's going on here, and I've gotten better at it, but I still don't do it much. Anyways, I think that my goal for life, since I can remember, maybe since like 6th grade or something like that, was to make enough money to eject myself from society to where I could be completely...
So you just don't need to be a part of it.
Completely self-sufficient.
Yeah.
I have my own land, my own access to water, I grow my own food, I am completely self-sufficient. I don't need grocery stores, I don't need to go into town at all. I can just live out there on the land and get away from everybody who I found to be tribalistic and toxic and unwilling to understand each other, as we were just talking about in Xenogears.
Yeah.
I had a very pessimistic view of people, and I still do to a large extent. I do not like them very much. I like them individually.
Yeah.
I hate them as a group, as a collective on any scale.
That's so funny. Do you know why? I read this in one of Carl Jung's books very recently. The group mentality, as you get a larger and larger group, what do you call it? Like just herd mentality, just the way people think and act and talk becomes more and more basic.
Yeah.
But there is a way to kind of get to the collective unconscious quicker in a group than just by yourself.
Yes.
And that's because when you're collective and a bunch of people, whatever the majority of people want is what everyone ends up doing.
Yes, they all move together on something. They
and there's it's almost as if there's the the invisible hand? Is that Keynes or Locke? Was it Jonathan Locke? The invisible. There's like a hand guiding them, moving them from place to place, and they'll do things that violate their own moral code if they're getting a riot or something, you know.
Yeah.
But people, the more and more people, you just get into a baser subconscious level until you basically reach like the collective subconscious, which I find absolutely fascinating.
Really cool.
But it's like it's kind of crazy because it's just like it's just a baser like mammalian kind of thing. I don't know. It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
I just figured I'd bring that up.
But that's a good point. And this kind of relates to where I'm going with this. So, I mean, I was at a place when I played Death Stranding where intellectually I understood the problem with my base worldview and the way I looked at people. I knew it probably wasn't right, but I could not feel any different. I just felt the way I felt and I couldn't shake that feeling.
And that's how it is.
I knew people are probably better than I give them credit for.
Right.
I should probably have more hope and less pessimism about people. I should probably do more than I am doing to get better at being social. But why should I? I have no impetus to do so. It's more comfortable to be the way I am and to think the way I do. So there was a bit of a conflict with my mind and my heart on this topic. And then I played Death Stranding. I am not a social gamer, and I never have been, outside of your brothers coming over to play Smash Brothers or Mario Party or something like that. Or to go watch you play Harvest Moon 64 when you were showing that to me for the first time. Or you came over and played FF7 at my place, whatever it might be. That kind of thing, or co-op, like one couch co-op, cool. Yeah. But even that, I would not rather do that than play something on my own, right? I'd rather just play something solo. So I expected to completely ignore all of the social aspects of the gameplay of Death Stranding. That's what I expected to do. And this is exactly what Kojima set out to challenge in people. Because the main character is me.
Oh yeah.
It's like the same guy.
Just yeah.
Same mindset about people, the same pessimism about people. The state that the world is in, we deserved it. We brought it on ourselves.
Right. People are too stupid.
You need to do, figure it out on your own. I don't need people. He actually has a condition where he can't be touched by people. There's some kind of thing where, like, I don't know if it's a physical thing where it's like it burns him, or it's just a psychological, emotional thing. I can't remember what it was.
That's come up in a few Korean dramas.
Yeah, but it's like he can't even have any form of human touch. It's not.
Yeah.
He's not able to do it. So he's just totally isolated himself, and he has all these, terrible feelings about human beings. So that's kind of where I was mentally at the time. And so I'm playing the game, right? And I pick up, I don't remember what it was. I pick up some package that I'm taking somewhere, because that's what the game is. You're hooking everybody up to a network so they can communicate again. The United States is completely offline. They can't communicate with people in other places in the country. There's just these small isolated places and communities, and nobody is communicating with each other anymore. So you're set off to connect everyone to this chiral network so they can start communicating and rebuilding again. And as you're doing this, you take parcels and packages to people. You're like a delivery man, basically. So I picked up, okay, so you pick up materials as you're going around, and you can invest those materials into getting better gear for yourself to make your job easier as a guy running around in these dangerous places with guys trying to, like, take your stuff from you. So you can, like, get exoskeletons to make you run easier, or all kinds of different, like, technology that makes delivering your packages easier. And you can take the materials, the raw materials you find out in the world, go take them to the right guy, he'll build you stuff, and, like, sweet. So I had just taken a bunch of materials that I was saving up to buy whatever technology I was looking to buy so that it would make my job easier. And I came across a structure that was one of the online structures. So it'll appear in the world, and it'll show you people are around you on the internet, right, are trying to build this road. And this would make it so that you could, where I was in the game, there was an area, a very dangerous area. There's a lot of enemies in this area. And at the time, there's no road through it. I had to run through there. And every time I run through there, these guys come and try to beat me up and take my stuff.
Jump on you.
And it's really kind of hard to get through there at this point of the game. I come across a structure that's an online structure that the community is trying to build a road through that area so you can drive through it fast. Because there's no way a vehicle could drive through the terrain at the time. It's too rocky and it's impossible to drive through. And I literally stopped in my tracks on my delivery. I went back to where I had dumped my materials, and I brought it, and I contributed to the community road. And I caught myself doing that, and I was like, what the heck am I doing? Yeah. This is not like me. But that was the point he was trying to get across. In whatever pretentious fashion he was doing in the cutscenes and the writing, he was trying to show that it is better for humans to work together than it is to isolate. We have to come together. We have to. It's how we survived when we were competing against lions and tigers in the wild.
Well, that's so funny, because that goes towards the theme of the game and just the general, like, the fact of the game. The country is fractured. It's broken,
Yes.
And it's like he's able to do that thematically as well as within the story.
With the gameplay.
Yeah.
And I was convinced to do it. I was convinced to come out of my solo playthrough of the game that I always do and contribute to the community and work with them. And I started to build things to help that instead of just what would help me do my playthrough of the game easier. And I was not consciously aware of when I was doing that. I just started doing it because I knew that was going to be better for everyone. And that is a very anti-Mike way of thinking. It completely challenged my worldview in that sense. And it was because of that that I appreciated Death Stranding, despite its technical flaws in the storytelling, because it got me to see that.
Sweet.
And it got me to change how I think about that. Not completely. I mean, I haven't completely changed on that. I'm still who I am. I'm still a very introverted person. but it got me to really think about that on another level, and that's why I liked the game. You got one for this?
Yeah,
I do.
those four girls from Xenogears.
Garrett Carmen says, "What is the one JRPG character trope that you can't stand?"
Oh, I thought it said troop.
Oh,
Is it troop or trope? Is the U supposed to be there, or is the E not supposed to be
Let's
there?
just answer them both. What's your least favorite troop first? The Elements girls from Xenogears?
Now that you said the Elements girls from Xenogears, but now that you've said trope, I think that's probably what it's going for.
That's what I thought.
Isn't that just OPE? Anyways, okay.
Yeah. You're right. It could be troop. I don't know.
Okay, so trope, I love almost all tropes because they make me smile and they're callbacks to other things, and I like it when things are done similar to other things but a little different. I like that. But, see, because some people would say, oh, the trope of the main character, his parents are dead.
Yeah.
I see it all the time. Sometimes I even roll my eyes when that happens. Depends on how it's done. But that has to happen.
Yeah.
It has to happen. The character can't just have these parents. Why is he leaving if he's got these great parents? And anyways, I think Earthbound has some funny take on that, I suppose. He didn't mean to go to the other world. It all just kind of happened to him, right? But regardless, the idea that the main character would then be separated from his parents is pretty essential to telling a decent story, because the idea is you leave your parents and you go and have an adventure in the world, right? Now, do your parents have to die? I don't know, but that certainly makes it easier. Like when you're looking at like Harry Potter, he was an orphan. He had to be an orphan. If he had good parents, then he never would have gone to wizard school, except his parents were already wizards, but then he's already in the wizard school, so it doesn't matter, right? He had to be an orphan, and this is also true of like Frodo. Frodo had to be adopted, he had to be able to just go out on his own, basically. And then in the movie Twilight, the girl, her parents are divorced, and neither of them, and it's a weird situation, and it's a perfect situation for her to then leave and go forge her own path.
Yeah.
You just can't do that. It's harder for readers to read a book where the character leaves a perfectly good working family situation and then goes and becomes a wizard in a different world and leaves forever.
Yeah.
Right? And there other stories could maybe make it work, but it's like Freud. Sigmund Freud said, a boy does not become a man until his father is dead. And that makes me think about my own life, and I'm just like, I think I know what he's saying there.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and that is, these coming of age stories are tropes, sure, but like they're that way for a reason. Exactly. They're that way for a reason. And they're forced into this. They don't want to go save the world. Like the people that are wanting to go save the world, those are the bad guys. The people who are reluctant and humble and don't feel adequate, they're the ones that actually can do the right thing. It's the people who are like, I'm setting off, I'm going to go save the world. Those are the people who end up committing genocide and doing horrible things. Yeah. So anyways, my point is, tropes, I love almost all of them. And because because all tropes are calls back to something else. And I just really appreciate that a lot. There's probably some tropes that are just like stupid and shouldn't exist, but I can't really think of one right now. Can you?
I'll give you two.
Oh, well, let me hear them.
Everything you just said, I agree with, by the way.
Okay.
I think that tropes, when you look at storytelling the way that we're talking about, right, as some sort of reflection on the life experience, and when you see how it can relate, like what you're saying with like a boy doesn't become a man till his dad is dead kind of thing, and that relates to the trope of losing your parents, which is part of JRPGs.
And the, what do they call it, the teenage years, the becoming, what are the age, coming of age.
Coming of age.
Yeah, becoming a man or a woman.
All of that I agree with. Like, I have no problem with tropes. What I have a problem with is generally, especially if it's like the same creator or the same group, reusing a trope in exactly the same way over and over and over again.
Like Star Wars?
Because, well, yeah, but because it's almost like a plot convenience to get you to where you're going. That's usually what ends up bothering me. And it's not because it's bad or wrong. It's just no longer interesting. It's just,
Yeah.
I've seen this already. I've done this a million times kind of thing. In particular, I don't like the use of amnesia as a plot device in JRPGs to conceal the mystery of the story until it is the time to reveal it as an exposition dump at the end.
Yeah.
Unless it's done with the character's arc in mind. So Xenogears is a great example of amnesia used in a way that is magnificent for the character's development.
Okay, yeah.
Final Fantasy VII, I would say, is not really amnesia so much as just a misremembering or having scrambled memories. Because he remembers more or less accurately what happened, just there's a few of the details that weren't right. And I won't say that in case there's anyone who could possibly watch this channel who has not played Final Fantasy VII before. But
You never know.
there are other things where it just feels like there isn't really a good reason that the character has amnesia, because retrograde amnesia does not usually work like that. You don't smack your head and forget all the important mysteries of the story, but you still remember how to
from
speak
the moment
and walk and do math
and do all that
feed
stuff.
yourself and be a mercenary or whatever. I remember all that, but I just don't remember the important details of the plot.
Yeah.
That to me is a trope that bugs me.
It's bothersome, it is. But you know where amnesia comes from, right? Amnesia comes from the idea that we all came from some greater place that we can't remember.
Yes.
You know, supposedly we were
A pre-existence.
in a pre-earth, living with God, and then we came down to earth and can't remember our past, but we have a glorious past with a great different parent, divine parents.
Sure.
They're not our regular Joe Schro parents that we have here. We got divine parents and a royal past and all this stuff. Like there's that story's been told a billion times, basically in every single religion, and that is the idea of amnesia. It doesn't make sense because practically we know people, we've had it before or anything, only because it makes us think of the innate human curiosity of where did I come from, why am I here,
Yes.
and what does this all mean?
100%
and we don't
true.
know, and so amnesia is like people just gravitate towards
You
that.
are on the money. It's not the trope itself.
It's like the way
I have
it's
a problem
used.
with it. It's how it's implemented. Was
So
it done
I
in
would-
a lazy way, or was
Yeah.
it done in a way that is trying to be novel or interesting, or change it up somewhat?
So if it's an argument about the way the trope is done as
Yes.
opposed to the tropes, then I can get with that.
Okay.
I can get on board with
So we can agree there. But here's a trope that I think can't possibly
All right.
have relevance
Let's
to
hear it.
any kind of philosophical human condition. And that is every single character having to have a turn to say something.
that. Oh my gosh, video games are the worst at that.
I hate it.
You don't get that in books, you
I
don't get
hate
that
it.
in movies, you sometimes do and it's annoying. But in video games, specifically, they always freaking
And it's
do
mostly in Japanese video games too.
that. It's almost always Japanese.
For example, we just finished Xenogears. At the end of it, when Deus Core is shooting out into the sky, and they're all describing no, Faye, can't give up or whatever. Every single character had to have a turn, including Choo Choo, to say something to him encouraging, and then he could go. This is all over JRPGs, and it is hilarious to me every time because it is so weird and unnatural.
It's obnoxious. I don't have I don't have a response to that one. That one can freaking go and get out.
Yeah, I don't
quickly.
like it. Don't like it. But what's my least favorite JRPG character? Troop? That is a good question.
It's got to be a troop, like the in Paper Mario, the Koopa brothers.
Yeah, the
four.
Koopa Bros. Yeah. Trying to think here. I'm trying to think of all the troops in these games, and ones I don't like. I don't think I have that many
There's not
to
too many.
speak of. I like the Turks in FF7.
Yeah, the Turks are good. That's a troop.
I like Cypher's pals.
There you
in
go, in
FF8.
8.
I like them a lot. I think they're great characters.
Well, what about Kingdom Hearts? What about Goofy,
Oh,
Donald?
shoot. I don't like Kingdom Hearts.
There you go. Found it.
Organization 13.
Oh, that troop. Oh, that's way cooler, though, than Goofy and Donald.
Most of those dudes are obnoxious to me.
All right.
There's like 2 of the 13 that I think are cool. The rest of them I think are dumb. All right. I'll get some hate for that.
You sure will.
Let's see. I'm going to skip this one. Sorry, Hunter. It's a good question. I just don't have a great answer for it. Okay. This one will be fun. Laser Focus says, please share your experience with the creative project you've done, like how you deal with writer's block, the idea generation, execution, iterative process, etc. You're going through this.
I'm going through this
now,
literally right
and
now.
that's kind of why I want to talk about it.
By the way, my character's parents are dead.
Are dead.
I
There you
regret
go.
to
You
tell
got the
everybody
trope.
that in the book I'm writing, my character's parents have passed. Moment of silence.
Yeah.
Okay, it's really hard. What I do is I reduce resolution, right? Like, so if I can't figure out what to write next, I step back and I say, okay, what's the general idea of what I'm trying to write? And if I don't even have that, because that happens a lot too, like that's really hard, then I just keep stepping back. Like basically I've summarized my book in about 12 sentences, something like that. That's basically the entire book in those 12 sentences, right? And it's like, okay, that's awesome. But I didn't start out that way.
Yeah.
I started out trying to write the book, chapter 1, first steps. Oh, what am I doing?
It's hard.
I can't do this.
Hard.
All right, let's keep reducing resolution until just one sentence. If you can't keep writing, just write just one sentence about what you're trying to write about, right? And if you can't do that, then just like take some time to just think for a little bit. Now, one of the biggest recommendations from some people is even if you don't know what to write, just start writing. Just start going da 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 da, and eventually you'll just start writing a thing that turns into a paragraph that actually makes sense, and then you're back on track. That doesn't work well for me because I can write a ton of stuff, and as I'm writing this stuff, like it gets convoluted, and I end up having to re-sift through it to find anything valuable in what I just wrote. I'd much rather just kind of take a step back and just think for a little while. But typically, I can at least get one sentence, right? Like, what do I think might be the way that these two sentences connect together? Like, what are some ideas? Even if they're stupid, this one, or maybe this one, or maybe some joker shoots a crossbow into the air and hits the sun, and then the sun bleeds light onto the earth, and it's a waterfall of light. That's actually kind of an interesting idea.
I like that, actually.
From mythology. But, like...
Mythology's funny like that.
That's what sunbeams are. Yeah, all crazy stuff like that happens all the time. And it's like, okay, that's weird and not on the right track, but, like, at least I'm thinking something creative, you know? And then you can come up with a few different ones and pick the best one, and then just elaborate on it. And then, okay, maybe turn that sentence into a paragraph. Okay, now turn that paragraph, break it up, now do a few more paragraphs, and now you've got like 3 pages written about that one sentence, and you're good. All you did was elaborate on the one, you just need one sentence, or maybe even one word. Yeah. Like this word accurately sums up what I think might happen. It has something to do with pixies, but I don't know how. Pixies. Then pixies what? Pixies fly. Okay, where do they fly? Okay, they fly over here. I don't know. Okay, and then why did they do that? Well, because there's a thing there they need to get. And then before you know it, you're writing a whole paragraph now, and you're gonna have to go back and edit it, but that's your whole book anyways. Yeah. You gotta go back and edit it 100 times. You just need to get the story there in roughly the form that you want it to be in. Anyways, that's what I got. I struggle with this a lot though. This is very hard for me.
It's the struggle of every creator because everybody kind of has to find a different path.
It's like, come on, be creative, just write. It's like, no,
it doesn't work for everybody.
It's not like that.
So my book has gone through so many iterations over so many years that it's kind of hard to even summarize.
It's almost just editing
process
over and over.
So it started out as a sophomore English project where we were reading The Odyssey that year, we read The Hobbit that year, we read a bunch of hero's journey type stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what we were analyzing was the hero's journey, that sophomore English class. And well, at least in the literature portion of it. Of course, we had like the grammar part too, but in the literature portion, that's what we were doing. So she assigned a 5-page story, original story, where we had to incorporate all the elements of the hero's journey. Now, I assume the only way to do that is to more or less write this really funky, this person went here, and this guy, he stumbled across an old wise man who
Yes,
like
of course.
just like really blow through it
And-
like that.
Yeah.
To do it in 5 pages.
Sure.
I saw absolutely no way I could write anything that would actually be cool to read without turning it into a novella, which is what I
Right.
did.
Yeah.
I wrote 129 pages, and I turned that in.
Yeah.
It was I think like over a weekend or over 5 days maybe. Total.
That's crazy, by the way. That's a ton.
It was insane. But the only reason I was able to do that was because there were so many places where I said, I need this element of the hero's journey. Let me just pull the mythology of Legend of Zelda and change
sure.
the names.
Okay.
Let me just pull
Hey.
this scene from the Odyssey and change the names.
I am totally for that.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea.
That was basically what I had to do
Right.
in order to get the thing done on time.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't have come up with like nice, interesting twists on all that. Here's a thing from Prince of Persia I like. That's in my story now. Here's a thing from this. Here's the opening scene, or my opening scene will be the anime portion of Kill Bill.
Of Kill Bill, yes. Which is sick.
It's basically what it was.
Yeah.
It was just an amalgamation of all the cool stuff I liked turned into a story that each corresponded with the different elements of the hero's journey.
Yeah.
That was my first draft of the story. And
That's a really good way to do a first draft.
well, I think that is like a high schooler's form of what we all end up doing
Right.
in more complex ways as adult writers.
Right.
Is
But it's lowering the resolution, which I think is good.
Yeah, you lower the resolution
you
of it.
simplify.
It's
yeah.
not as complex as your ways of departing from the thing that's inspiring you and
Yeah.
twisting it into an original thing.
Right.
But it is still
That comes
inspired
later.
by that thing.
Yeah.
And that inspiration is
It
still
still
seen
references that
clearly,
thing.
right?
Yeah.
So my inspirations were too opaque. Let's
Yeah.
call it that. My teacher said, you should publish this. And I said, no way. Because all my buddies who have played The
He
Legend of
doesn't
Zelda
know,
and
but
Prince of Persia and Xenogears and this and that you don't know what that stuff is. And that's
I
why
know,
you think
the
it's
teacher
cool.
doesn't know.
right?
Yeah, that's funny.
So, anyways, the next step was to try to do that. How do I make this my own now?
Yeah.
And that was a huge process where I'd get stuck and get stuck and get stuck in these places of writer's block because I just don't know how to make it more original. I don't know
Yeah.
how to make it more mine. And so it was like, like, how do I do that? I mean, I went through a whole phase where it was hard for me not to just more or less, it's not true plagiarism by the strict sense of the word, but even just in essays,
A reference or
anything I would
Yeah.
write, how do I write this?
Yeah.
Let me go look at an example from someone I admire who's
Yes.
good at it and basically copy how they do it. When I wrote songs in my band in high school,
Oh,
I would
right.
copy the chord progressions
Sure.
of the bands I listened
Yeah.
to because I just didn't know how to do it myself. I had to copycat.
That's good. That's
Right?
good practice, though. That's good.
But that copycatting gets you a wealth of things that
yes.
you now have to
now
pull
you can
inspiration
start
from.
taking away from things instead of adding.
Right, or combining them
combining.
in interesting ways that haven't been done before.
Yeah, that's smart.
So that just takes experience. It takes a lot of experience and a lot of practice. But I think what ended up happening for me is that I was trying to, like you were, open the chapter and just write the words.
I know.
But I was like, too often I was coming across things I'd have to describe that I just had no idea how that works in
Yeah.
my world.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will
That's
give
where
the
it's like-
opposite advice of what I'm about to give,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is people usually tell you to stop world building and just write. Because
Oh.
people can get too caught up in the world building stuff. But my opinion is you need to world build first before you write.
That's what I've come to recently. Because as soon as I'm like, I have no idea what happens next, that's because it's like, well, you haven't built your world enough.
Yeah.
You don't know how this works yet. You can't write this book until you know how this all
Yeah.
works. And then you have to focus on world building. I'd agree
Yes.
with that.
It
It doesn't mean that all the world building needs to go into the book.
Yes, exactly.
But you need to understand it.
There
Yeah.
are some writers who will use world building as an excuse to get away from the writing because
Yeah.
it's hard. And it's like, well, it's almost like you distract yourself with something else. Have you ever been like, I need to do this task, but there's all these other tasks that aren't as important as that,
Yeah.
but they also need to be done. And thinking
And I'd
about this
rather
is
do
too
them?
much right now.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to do all this to stay busy.
Yes. And then you feel productive still.
But you feel productive,
Yeah.
but you didn't actually do what you should have done.
Yes.
That's kind of what writers will do with world building.
Sure.
They'll go do all this stuff, but
And none of it makes it into the book.
they don't actually write.
Yeah.
So I'm agreeing with that to some level. But I had to start from the beginning. I had to start from the genesis of my universe. I had to know every single event that led from the freaking Big Bang of my universe all the way up until my book starts.
Yeah, that's crazy,
I
man.
had to know that in
Yeah.
order to feel comfortable writing something and being like, this actually makes sense to me now. So for my mythology, I wanted to try to not do a mythology that's common.
You've explained it to me, and it's pretty unique. It's pretty cool.
There's a lot of stories that will copy from Greek mythology or Norse mythology. Those are very popular.
My story's copying pretty
Right.
heavily from
So I decided to look at Egyptian mythology.
Nice.
Because I felt like I haven't seen that as much. What kind of, because mythology is really interesting. The stories are kind of simplistic and silly, but there's something so genuine about a really well-written one that can feel authentic
Yes.
to how these legends were really created in the real world.
And there's so much like symbolism and deeper stuff. Like when they say that this thing happened, it's like there's just in a few sentences of a good, well-written mythology from a long time ago, authentic, contains more than you realize. Like every word is specific.
Yes, it's a lot. It seems simple, but there's a lot of symbolism that gives it its meaning.
Yeah.
And so you have to be able to analyze that and break that down. Okay, how can I sort of incorporate that? So I kind of turned to Egyptian mythology to get some of my ideas, but that's where I had to start. And then once I had created my magic system, had the whole genesis of my universe, and more or less, I knew what my theme was. I knew for sure what I'm trying to say. Then, when I'm sitting there writing, I know what to say. Because it's like, oh, I could say anything. They could go do this. They could run away from this fight. They could get zapped out by some wizard they didn't know existed, and he could explain a whole... I could do anything. How do you focus out of all that noise and actually go somewhere? And that helps when you have the rules. When the rules exist and you know what can't happen.
Yes.
When you know what can't happen, then you have to get creative. You have limits.
Yeah.
Okay, now...
And you want those limits. You actually
you
want them.
need limitations.
Because in a world where anything can happen, how in the world do you write anything, right?
I don't know.
You need to come up with what can and cannot, is and is not possible. Then you can write some story.
I feel like limitations breed creativity.
I think so.
And so you got to put limitations on your world, on your characters, and on yourself in order to feel like you can focus in on an answer. There it is. And now this has got to relate somehow to what I'm trying to say in this book. If it's a scene that doesn't contribute to that, why is it here? The characters cannot do this to escape this situation. So they have to work within these confines. How can I make them succeed? These types of things really zero you in on an answer, and then it feels easier to write. That's the best.
That's good.
The best explanation I can give, but that's kind of how my creative process has been. It started with a lot of copying and iteration on things, derivative nature of it, and me going, how do I make that more my own? How do I look at sources that aren't as used as others are? And how can I limit myself in order to breed the creativity and get focused and feel like I can find an answer among this ether of possibility.
Yeah.
Right? All right. One of our cameras is already out of whatever. I guess it's probably the memory card.
I suppose.
It died out. But that one's still going, and that one's still going. No, it isn't. Holy fetch. It's just this one.
Yep. Hey, guys.
Kaysen is the only one left in this podcast, and so we're gonna stop there. Our big cards that we record
The podcast.
the main podcast on, they're 256 gigabytes. These are the smaller ones, so we're gonna have to stop there because we're out of memory. Thanks for watching. You guys are beasts. You guys are huge beasts. We appreciate you, and we'll see you again next month. Peace out.
Peace.